All right, welcome everyone to our benchmarking basics session today, which will also feature a demonstration on Ameren, Missouri's benchmarking and energy efficiency portal. My name is Emily Andrews. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Green Building Council, Missouri Gateway Chapter, and I'm excited to co-present this presentation with the City of St. Louis Building Division and also Ameren, Missouri. So today's agenda, we'll walk through some quick introductions. We'll cover the reasons for benchmarking. We'll talk about the City of St. Louis's Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, which is the benchmarking requirement. And then we'll walk through the basic steps of how to actually benchmark your energy and water use using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Then we'll have Ameren do a benchmarking and energy efficiency portal demo. And then we can take some questions or do breakout rooms if we need to do that. So I'll go ahead and jump in. I will have my co-presenters introduce themselves. Rajiv, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Rajiv Ravalapati. I work for the Building Division for the City of St. Louis. I manage and oversee our Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, also known as the Benchmarking Ordinance. And thanks for watching this tutorial.
Great. Mike?
Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Brockman here with Ameren, Missouri, program specialist working on the income eligible programs as well as the Biz Savers program. And within Biz Savers, this benchmarking portal came up. So I'm kind of the point person for the BEAT portal with any questions, and also happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
All right. Thank you both. I'm going to jump right into a little bit of background on why we promote benchmarking building energy use. So the first thing is to talk about a definition of benchmarking. And the definition that we use is that tracking your building's energy use and then comparing that to your performance in the past and to similar buildings is called benchmarking. And we use a phrase that's pretty common out there: you can't manage what you don't measure. I like to think of benchmarking as a Fitbit for your building, a way to make sure that you're paying attention to the things that need to be addressed. And a big reason for benchmarking is that our buildings have a really big impact on our lives, from our economy to our health to the environment. In the United States, we spend about 90% of our time indoors, and buildings represent about 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions in the United States, and that's both residential and commercial buildings. So I think a lot of people look at statistics like that and may get a little overwhelmed, but to me, I see that there is a great opportunity for saving energy and saving money and improving the environment as well as improving human health. Locally, the impacts of buildings on climate are even greater. In the city of St. Louis, and this is data from the 2018 greenhouse gas emission inventory, the most recent that's been completed, buildings represent about 65% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and that's commercial and residential combined. And when you add industrial to that, you're pretty much looking at almost the entire pie with a little bit of transportation in there. So there's a real reason to be paying attention to energy use in our buildings. Another reason for benchmarking is there's a huge opportunity for savings. 30% of the energy used in our buildings is wasted through inefficiency. That's a statistic that comes from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And then half of all energy savings are possible through no and low cost operational improvements. So this is really the first step to saving energy, water, and money in our buildings. A little bit of additional context for benchmarking and specifically policies related to existing buildings in the city of St. Louis. The city has a pretty aggressive climate protection initiative that includes becoming carbon neutral by 2050. In order to do that, we really need to be paying attention to the buildings and their energy efficiency and how they use energy. You can see that building energy efficiency is a big piece of the puzzle. There are obviously other things that the city is working on, but that's a big piece of how they're addressing their climate goals. Additionally, these sorts of policies reduce buildings' impact on the environment, and it helps us in St. Louis stay competitive with other cities and supports the building division's goal to maintain and improve our building stock, which is really a unique and important part of our city. So I'm just going to walk through a few of the requirements related to the Building Energy Awareness Ordinance, or the benchmarking requirement, and then we'll get into the details of how to actually benchmark. So this legislation was passed and signed in 2017 by the Board of Aldermen, and it requires that all municipal and private buildings over 50,000 square feet, that they all must track and report their energy and water use annually. So this is institutional buildings, city-owned buildings, multifamily, commercial, and anything kind of in that 50,000 square foot range. There are a few exemptions for buildings. Manufacturing buildings that use most of their energy on a manufacturing process don't have to benchmark. If you had no or low occupancy, if you were in some sort of financial duress or declaring bankruptcy, you could be exempt. And state and federal buildings don't have to comply with local laws. So while we encourage them to benchmark and submit their data, they are not required to. There are a few things that can happen if you're not compliant with the ordinance. One of the big ones is that you would not be eligible for a new residential or commercial occupancy permit. So if you're not in compliance with benchmarking and you had a tenant that was moving out and you wanted to bring a new tenant in, you could not get that occupancy permit to move forward. We have been working, USGBC, with the City of St. Louis for several years to provide training and assistance on benchmarking, and also Rajiv provides a lot of one-on-one assistance as well. So we want to make sure that people have the information they need, and the training and education is available to help you through the process. And then every year, the reporting deadline is on May 1st for the previous calendar year's data. So we've passed that deadline now. This is July of 2021, and so May 1st was the deadline to submit your 2020 data. There's still time to do that without getting a fine if you do so by, what is it, Rajiv, in mid-August, is that right? I think sometime in August. All right. So moving on to a few resources that you will probably want to take advantage of. The city has a great website, stlbenchmarking.com, that collects all the information you need to benchmark your building. There are a lot of tools available under the resources tab. There are links to utility incentives and resources. There are instructions on how to comply, and places where you can look up additional information about your building, as well as the links to actually report your data. So bookmark this, stlbenchmarking.com. Related to benchmarking, the city also has passed legislation that requires buildings make improvements to their building, energy improvements to their buildings. In 2020, the Board of Aldermen passed the Building Energy Performance Standard, and this requires the same buildings that have to benchmark, those municipal and private buildings that are 50,000 square feet and greater, those have to meet a minimum level of energy performance, which we call the standard. And those standards were approved in May of 2021, and most buildings have until May 4th of 2025 to comply. So 4 years from when the standards were approved. There are a few exceptions to that 2025 date. Affordable housing, qualified affordable housing, and houses of worship have until 2027, so they have 6 years to comply. The metric that buildings will have to meet is a weather normalized site EUI, and that is set based on benchmarking data that's been submitted in the city of St. Louis and is specific to your building type. Compliance for this happens through benchmarking reporting, which is one more reason why benchmarking and being compliant is so important. Additionally, the ordinance that outlines the performance standard creates a building energy improvement board to oversee the implementation, as well as an office of building performance to assist owners. So lots of folks available to provide support and assistance. And then just moving right on from the why benchmark to how to benchmark. We use a tool called Energy Star Portfolio Manager for benchmarking. This basically helps you figure out where you stand in terms of your building energy use and how you compare to your peers. And the Energy Star Portfolio Manager tool that we use for this process is used by about 50% of the commercial building market in the United States. So this is not an untried tool. It's out there, it's free, and it's managed by the US Environmental Protection Agency. You can use it to benchmark energy, water, and waste. And as I mentioned, you can't manage what you don't measure. There are a few different ways to benchmark energy performance in Portfolio Manager. The first is a 1 to 100 Energy Star score. The second is national medians, and I'll talk about those two in a little more detail in a second. And then you can also use Energy Portfolio to compare similar buildings in your portfolio should you have multiple buildings. You can compare to past performance, and then there are also ways in Portfolio Manager to set a target performance and then move towards that to improve your energy management and your energy use. So looking at that 1 to 100 Energy Star score, this is basically a percentile rating, and it's available to most building types. There are a few building types where there just isn't enough data to provide that 1 to 100 score, but basically if your score is 50, you're right in the middle. So that means you perform better than 50% of comparable buildings, similar buildings, and worse than 50%. And these scores, these Energy Star scores, are normalized for your building size, for occupancy, and for weather. So we're really comparing apples to apples. Buildings in St. Louis wouldn't be compared to buildings in, say, California, where they don't need as much heating and cooling as we do. So we're not being penalized for our weather in this tool at all. And then if you are eligible for this 1 to 100 score and you're in the 1 to 50 range, that means your building isn't performing that well, but it also means you have a huge opportunity to improve and to implement what we like to call low-hanging fruit or low and no-cost changes to your buildings and operations that can really make a big difference. If you're in the 50 to 75 range, you're in what Energy Star calls the tune phase, which means that you could likely increase your efficiency through things like retro-commissioning or paying some attention to small issues or malfunctions that may be lowering your energy performance. And then if you're above 75, there's an opportunity to celebrate. That means your building is among the top 25% of similar buildings, and you're eligible for an Energy Star certification. So that's the 1 to 100 Energy Star score. The other way to track your performance, that is the other kind of second most common way that people use Portfolio Manager, is to look at medians that are out there that aren't Energy Star. So you can get an energy use intensity, which is basically your energy used by square foot. And this will also compare you to national median EUIs for property types, for similar property types. So in this example here, it gives you a sense of where you stand and whether you're using a lot more energy than buildings that are similar to you. It provides a baseline and then your current EUI as you go forward and benchmark. The steps for benchmarking are actually relatively straightforward. Energy Star Portfolio Manager has a great quick start guide that walks you through the steps at a fairly high level. Today, Rajiv is going to pick up in a minute and go over the process in a little more detail. And as we work through it, it sometimes seems like a lot, but I like to remind people of these 5 steps. Like, this is what it takes. And it's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. You log in, you add your property, you add your meters, you add your energy data, and then you review the results. It's pretty straightforward. And once you have all the details you need, it actually moves pretty quickly. So I think, Rajiv, this is where you pick up. Oh, wait, I skipped a slide. I'm sorry. I skipped the slide on the reporting checklist. So once you've actually benchmarked your building, once you've gone through these 5 steps, to benchmark your building and add your energy use, then you want to report your data to the city of St. Louis. And there's a great reporting checklist at stlbenchmarking.com. So you'll benchmark following the steps in the quick start guide. You'll check for errors. You'll make sure you add your St. Louis building ID, and then you generate and submit your report to the city. So there's a great, like I said, great tool for following those steps. Rajiv will cover some of those as well, but that's kind of the high level of how you both benchmark and then report your data. All right, now Rajiv, you're up.
All right, thanks, Emily. So I'm going to walk you through creating your portfolio manager account, and then, as Emily stated, the details of actually benchmarking your property. So the first step, of course, is if you don't have a portfolio manager account, you need to create one. And that's where you go to the website listed right there on the slide, energystar.gov/benchmark. And that's where you can sign up and create an account, or if you already have an existing account, where you can log in. And you just simply need to create a username and password, and Portfolio Manager emails you a confirmation link where you just verify and activate your account. So the first step is just simply creating your account. And once you have created that account, you'll enter Portfolio Manager, and the first thing you'll want to do is add a property. So when you first log in, you'll notice everything's blank because you have a brand new account, so there's nothing there. So to add a property, underneath the My Portfolio tab, there's a blue button that says Add a Property, and you click on that. From there, Portfolio Manager is going to ask you basic building information. It's going to ask you about selecting a property type, whether your building is a hotel, an office, a theater, warehouse, so forth. Then it's going to ask you about the property's buildings. If it is a single standing building, if it is if it is a part of a building, if it's more than one, where it involves a campus type property. And there's a special guidance for campus properties, which I'll get a little bit later into later in the presentation. And then the third basic building information step is selecting the construction status. So if you're an existing building, if this building is currently going through the design phase, or as Portfolio Manager calls it, a design project, or if you just want to do a test property to kind of play around with the tool, that's another option Portfolio Manager provides. And then once you've chosen and entered these three items, you'll click the blue Get Started button. So as you add that basic building information, Portfolio Manager will want you to be as detailed as possible about the property use. So that includes the name, if the building has a name, the property address, the total gross floor area, the year the building was built, its occupancy percentage, the number of buildings. Again, that it goes back to that question if your building is just a single building, if it's part of a building, or if it's one of many on a campus. And for a lot of jurisdictions that have benchmarking laws like St. Louis, you'll also want to enter in your St. Louis building ID. This is a unique building ID that we at the Building Division assign to all buildings that are required to comply with the benchmarking ordinance. So we use it for compliance tracking. And you can find your St. Louis building ID on stlbenchmarking.com through the address and building ID lookup function. So one of the most common questions we get is, what is the gross floor area? And one of the great things about Portfolio Manager is that it has a huge dictionary for a lot of the various terms that you're going to be entering inputs for. So gross floor area is a very common one. And according to Portfolio Manager, what they're looking for is the total property square footage between the exterior walls of the building. So it's including all of that finished area. Elevator shafts, stairwells, mechanical spaces, basements. This is very important to include all that operational gross floor area. So it's not the same as rentable or leasable space. And with Portfolio Manager, they don't typically recommend you including the parking square footage in your total gross floor area. But because they have such a big dictionary on these terms, they also have a lot of training and reference guides for users about each step when you're benchmarking a property. And there is actually an FAQ doc listed right at the bottom of this slide for more gross floor area details. So when determining your gross floor area, usually if you don't know your gross floor area, you can look at life safety drawings, you can look at architectural plans, you can actually physically measure the space out yourself. It's really important to try and get this the first time. Most people who are entering it in have already have internal documents that show the gross floor area. But one of the things that we do at the city is for buildings that are unsure of their square footage, we'll actually send out a building inspector to verify the square footage. We do that also to verify for exemption extensions. With the city's law, as Emily mentioned earlier, buildings 50,000 square feet and above have to track and report their energy and water usage. So for some buildings that are unsure if they actually have to comply, we'll send a building inspector to verify that square footage. And the reason that the gross floor area is so important is because it will impact your energy metrics. So when you're entering the gross floor area, if you don't know it initially, you can mark it as a temporary value, but you always want to make sure you confirm that value before you submit any data to the city of St. Louis. And there's also, like I mentioned in the previous slide, there is a FAQ doc about gross floor area details. So one of the frequent questions we get is adding multiple space types. So on this screenshot right here, this screenshot is located underneath the details tab within a property and portfolio manager, where you can, after you've entered that basic building information, you could add in the multiple space types if your building has multiple property uses. With Portfolio Manager, you want to try and enter as few as possible. Less is always more, but there is guidance on breaking out spaces. So one, if the property use type can get an Energy Star score, you'll want to break that space out. Retail can only get a score if it's greater than 5,000 square feet. Another reminder to break out your space is if the space takes up more than 25% of the total gross floor area. If the space is vacant or unoccupied, or if the operating hours are 10 hours different than the main property use type. And where that big blue arrow is, it's pointing to a drop-down menu where you can add and change property use types. And then below, so for this example right here, the building use, it gives you details for that property use that you choose. It's going to ask for that gross floor area. It's going to ask for those operating hours. And then depending on the property use type you pick, there'll be varying questions. So like for this example, it's asking for the number of workers, the number of computers, the percentage of the building that can be heated or cooled. If you were choosing, say, for example, a hotel, some of these detailed questions would vary, where they would be asking things like mechanical rooms or the number of refrigeration units or washers and dryers. So these use details will vary. And there is a online data collection worksheet that can help with this property use details. In Portfolio Manager, there's a lot of different property use types you can pick and a lot of sub properties. And then that hotel example actually turned out to be the example I was talking about. So yeah, like I was mentioning, so there's a lot of different additional data collected depending on the property type that you end up selecting. So after you've entered in your property's basic building information and its use type, you'll want to enter in the St. Louis building ID. This can be found underneath the details tab of the property. And on the left-hand side of the page, there's a section called Unique Identifiers. And there's a blue edit button where you'll click and you can enter in that building ID. So this often gets a little confusing with folks for one reason. Portfolio Manager, it's a tool offered by the federal government. So anytime you benchmark a property, set up a property, the tool will automatically generate its own property ID, what they call Portfolio Manager Property ID, which is listed up above. For jurisdictions that have laws like benchmarking, underneath the standard IDs section is where you enter in your unique St. Louis building ID. You'll choose it down from the drop-down menu, and then you'll enter your unique ID to the field box to the right. All St. Louis building IDs start with either a P for private or M for municipal buildings. But For all private building owners, they'll use P followed by some numerical digits. So after the next step is to add your utility meters. So there's an energy tab and a water tab, and there's also a waste and materials tab where you can track that information. That is not something that's required with the St. Louis's ordinance, but something we always recommend to folks, because the more information you give the tool, the more metrics it'll spit out back to you, and you get a better comprehensive snapshot of your building overall. But to set up your meters, you'll click on the energy tab and you'll click a blue button that says add a meter. When you're setting up your meter, it's going to ask you some basic information about the meter. You can choose to name your meter. That's something I do when I benchmark city buildings. You will choose the type of the type of units. So whether it's electricity, which is measured in kilowatt hours, or if it's natural gas, which is measured in either CCF or therms. And then after you enter in the name, the type, the units, it's going to ask you for the date the meter became active. This isn't asking for that historical installation date of the meter. The date the meter became active should be the same as the start date of the first bill that you enter. And anytime you see blue lettering in Portfolio Manager, you can click on that blue lettering and it'll give you a definition. So once you set up the meter, then this example right here for this supermarket, we see that there's been a natural gas meter set up, a fuel oil, and electric grid meter. You can expand that meter by clicking on the arrows to the left of it to start adding your energy data. So with utility data, according to the ordinance, it is an annual requirement. So it's asking for the previous year's usage between January 1 and December 31. It's asking for calendar year data. So with that, we know that bill periods likely won't line up with the calendar year. So you may need to gather about 13 months of bills. And you'll want to make sure you're tracking all of the meters that account for the total energy consumption in your building. The most common types of meters that you're going to want to track for benchmarking purposes is water, electricity, natural gas, district steam if you're on the city's downtown steam loop, or any energy services purchased in bulk like propane or diesel or fuel oil. So the information needed to benchmark that utility data, you'll need the start date of that billing cycle, the end date, the usage. Cost is not required, but I always like recommending and pushing folks to benchmark their cost information. That way you can know how much you're spending per square foot in your building. So all the asterisks on this slide are the required ones that Portfolio Manager will make sure you do when benchmarking your utility data. So the way you can gather those utility bills is either compiling the physical bills that you get from the respective utilities that cover that calendar year, or if you have online accounts, you can access your data online. So with Ameren and Spire, they both have dedicated websites where you can log in and capture that information. Electricity, again, is measured in kilowatt hours. Natural gas is measured in CCF, that's 100 cubic feet, or therms. Ashley Energy, which provides that steam consumption, or steam use rather, is measured in 1,000 pounds. And with water, you can access your water information at stlwater.com, and water is also measured in CCF, 100 cubic feet. And there is a third way, obviously, too, which is the Ameren's brand new Beat portal, which Mike will provide. Then that one is specifically focused on accessing aggregate electric data. But that's, like I mentioned, Mike will get into that with his demo. You can also access aggregate data. So monthly whole building aggregate data is available upon request from both Ameren and Spire. And this is really useful for our multi-tenant buildings or buildings that have hundreds and hundreds of meters. So the way you can do this is the city has a dedicated utility release form on stlbenchmarking.com, where you can, it's a 2-page release form where you can ask for that full calendar year worth of aggregate data and simply email it to each respective utility at the following email addresses listed on the slide, and they'll email it back to you in a spreadsheet. It's not a spreadsheet that's conducive to uploading in bulk in Portfolio Manager, so you will have to do just some copy and pasting, but it is very helpful for multi-tenant buildings or buildings that have a lot of shared meters or just, potentially hundreds of sub meters. Each utility is different on the speed of getting that data back to you, but with Ameren, you can spend 3 to 5 business days. Spire, the longest that we've seen is about a week. So to add that energy data, once you've got your meter set up, on this side, again, we're looking at that supermarket, and we are adding natural gas data here. And for this example, you'll want to click on the plus symbol where it says add another entry. And a moment ago, I mentioned about uploading a spreadsheet. So if you do add another entry, it's just going line by line where you enter that start date, that end date, and that usage, and that cost and estimation information if you'd like as well. Portfolio Manager has a spreadsheet template where you can house all this information, save it to your computer, and that way you're tracking it all in a spreadsheet, and you can just upload it in bulk if that's something that's easier for you to do. That's something I do for when we benchmark the city buildings. So this is what it's like to enter that utility data manually. You'll keep clicking add another entry, and a new line item will appear where you can enter in that start date, that end date, that usage, that cost, and that estimation information. And once you're done entering these values in, you'll just click the save button and they'll be saved to this meter for your property. When uploading data in bulk, the one thing to keep in mind is that the template for electricity and the template for natural gas are different. So you'll just want to make sure you're labeling your saved spreadsheets and knowing which spreadsheet accounts for which meter. And that uploading data in bulk for the meter, it's highlighted with that red circle at the bottom where you can just choose the file from your computer and click the upload button to upload that respective template to the meter, depending on what meter you have chosen. So here, this is accessing where you enter those bills. So again, all your energy meters will be housed underneath the energy tab. And for this example right here, we see that this property has 2 meters used to compute metrics, an electric meter and a gas meter. And anytime you see that blue lettering, you can click on it. So right here, if you click on electric grid meter, you'll go to your electric meter. If you click on natural gas, you'll go to your natural gas meter. If you click on the blue button where it says enter your bills, it'll take you, once you click that, it'll give you the option of which meter you want to enter data in. This is a very important step that I want to make sure I include is selecting the meters to include in your metrics. So whenever you're setting up meters and you put in a little bit of preliminary information in, the last thing it'll ask you is to select the meters to include in those metrics. It's a very important step because it'll look like you have selected, but oftentimes when we see benchmarking reports and that there's no electricity or natural gas consumption, a lot of the reason is because people did not choose their meters to include their metrics. So this is a section called changing your meter selections. So for this building example has a fuel oil, a natural gas, and an electric grid meter. And to the left, you'll see the 3 blue check boxes and white check marks. What this person is doing is check marking all the meters that account for the total energy consumption of the building. And so there's a total of 3 meters. And then you'll choose below where that red asterisk is, these meters account for the total energy consumption for the supermarket. Oftentimes people have multiple meters set up in a property. This is where you actually choose the meters that account for that energy consumption. And then once you apply those selections, you'll click a button below, another blue button that says apply those selections. So now the energy setup is complete and you'll get a notification that your energy meters have been selected and tied to the property, and you can now go to each meter on its own or click the enter your bills to update the bills. Underneath the summary tab, after you set up all your property use information, your energy information, your water, you can always check for errors. So underneath the summary tab, there is a data checker that says check for possible errors, where you can run a data quality check for the year in which you're benchmarking for. To create meters for water, it's the exact same process. It's just housed underneath a different tab, underneath the water tab, where you'll click add a meter and follow those same steps that we just went over with electric and gas and steam. So some common benchmarking issues that come up are the ones listed below. In Portfolio Manager, one of the things that I always look for is Energy Star scores. Energy Star scores are a comprehensive snapshot of your building's overall energy performance. If I ever see scores of 1 or 100, that always trips a flag for me for a building scoring that low or scoring perfect. And a lot of times, and it very well may be that your building is performing at a 100 and it's very efficient, or it's, you know, it's really not a very efficient building and it really is low at a 1. But most of the times there is some type of issue, and those common issues include incorrect gross square footage, incorrect property use details, there's missing utility data, energy use data or water, there's missing meters, there's gaps, there's incorrect units chosen for the energy usage, or there's typos. So you'll always want to, I would recommend using that data quality checker on the slide previous to try and catch some of these common benchmarking issues. So once you have benchmarked your property and you're ready to submit, you can now report your data. And the way you do that is you go to the homepage of stlbenchmarking.com, and on the image of the river, Mississippi River, there is a report data button where you'll click report data. And after you click report data, it'll redirect you back to Portfolio Manager to what's called a data request in the tool. And so this is an example of the 2019 year benchmarking data request, where it gives you some context and some instructions. And then if you go to the next slide, below those instructions are 2 fields where it's asking who's this data being submitted on behalf of. It's usually you choose myself if you're the building representative or owner. Oftentimes, though, you may choose someone else, where in this case, there may be a third party benchmarking on behalf of someone. And then the second field is your response. The time frame will always be locked in by the city. We are the ones that create this data request in Portfolio Manager. And then you choose the property or properties in which you are going to submit. And then once you choose that property, you'll click that blue button that says Generate Response Preview. So when you click that button, if you get a green bar that says your new response preview has been generated, green means good, there were no data issues, and you're ready to submit. You'll notice that top, underneath the green bar, that top row is where it houses your data request. It'll show you the status that it's been generated and the time, and then it'll give you an action. And that from that action drop-down menu, you'll choose Send Response.
All right, that's your last slide, Rajiv.
Oh, thank you.
So once you've benchmarked your data, once you've responded to the city, then you should be good to go until next year. And then you'll do all this again. Well, really, you'll just enter your utility data year after year and report to the city. Once the property is set up, it's set up, and you don't have to do that again. So thanks, Rajiv, for walking through that. We're going to turn it over to Mike Brockman from Ameren, Missouri, and he is going to give us a little demo of BEEP, the Benchmarking and Energy Efficiency Portal. And Mike, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Great, thanks. Looks like I'm getting host disabled participant screen sharing for me.
Sorry, I thought I set this. Okay, you should be good now.
Next. good. Just let me know when that comes up.
It looks good.
Okay, great. So thanks Rajiv and Emily for introducing me here. So I'm going to go over the benchmarking and energy efficiency portal, which we nicknamed BEEP for short, since that's kind of a mouthful. Just a little bit of background, like Emily mentioned, this tool actually was derived from the Building Energy and Awareness Ordinance, which requires commercial, municipal, multifamily buildings in the city.
Mike, your sound is kind of going in and out a little bit. I don't know if you maybe need to get a little closer or, sorry.
Let me see if that works. So I'm going to start over on this slide and continue.
Still real soft.
Okay. Let me see if I can.
Better when you're closer.
Okay, I'll just pull it forward. Sorry, I'm using a laptop I'm not too familiar with here. Is that any better?
Oh, yeah.
Much better right now. Yep.
Okay, I'll keep close. Sorry about that. Yeah, just some quick background. And like I was saying, so the ordinance required commercial, municipal, and multifamily buildings in the city over 50,000 square feet to benchmark. So at that time, Ameren customers and stakeholders reached out to Ameren coworkers and said there really needs to be some sort of tool to help out with this new ordinance and to help customers comply. So the benchmarking tool was officially adopted into our MIA 3 plan, which covers years 2019 through 2021. And so it was actually live on our website in late 2019. As Emily knows, like, and Rajiv knows, 2020 was full of a lot of testing and kind of getting some kinks out. And in 2021, we feel pretty good, but we're still trying to get people to use the tool and give us feedback so we can make it the best possible tool for this, helping out with this ordinance. So you can find the tool at beep.ameren.com. So what we really wanted to do was provide a single point of entry for building managers to verify multiple electric accounts associated with a single facility and allow for the upload, the download, and actually the passing over of that data to Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We're able to send over, download, or upload up to 24 months of data. The tool is actually fed from our data warehouse on a monthly basis, so customers will be getting the most up-to-date data based on our warehouse. And then it's going to be a little bit faster, or even much faster than other methods of obtaining the same information. As Rajiv pointed out, either kind of collecting your bills on your own or reaching out to our business center to request that data, which could take up to 5 days for you. And if you're getting close to a deadline, that might be too much of a time crunch for you. And then the last thing I just want to mention is the aggregation of the data is really great for our customers because it maintains that privacy of the individual unit or that individual customer. And so what do you really need to know coming into using our tool? It's really important to know either all service addresses or all meter numbers associated with the building, or a number of buildings if it's going to be that campus style. And you're going to create what's called locations within BEEP. And then once you create those locations, you're going to need to know some account numbers. If the facility has less than 4 locations associated with that building, you're going to need to know all the account numbers for it. But if it's a larger facility with 4 or more locations, you're only going to need 1 account number. So that's a really great thing. You're not going to have to get a bunch of release forms from too many of your customers or your people living in your units. You're just going to really need 1 account number. And if that's like a commercial account, or if it's a shared space account, that's even better. So you don't even have to really bother your residents. Next, I just wanted to explain a couple or 3 scenarios that you can use this BEEP tool. The first, you can kind of work within the tool itself just to obtain aggregate data and download that data. The second, and by far the most popular, is to use the tool to benchmark and then share with an existing portfolio manager account. That's what we're going to go through in this couple slides ahead and really dive into the steps to do that. And the third is if you're new to both BEEP and benchmarking or to portfolio manager, you can actually simultaneously set up a BEEP account and a portfolio manager account and then share that data across. Like I said, we're going to cover number 2 though, since my experience, it's the most popular. So first, you're going to register like any other portal. You're going to register and get that email confirmation. Once you get that, you're just going to log in with the credentials you created, and Beep's going to pop up this first kind of like questionnaire, and this will kind of direct you to which scenario you want to do. And since we want the second scenario of benchmarking your property and acting as an existing portfolio manager user, you're just going to say yes, or click benchmarking property and yes to that secondary question. Then you're going to click continue. And
Mike, you're still it's kind of going in and out a little bit. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. I can run and grab some earphones real quick and see if that helps.
That might be a good idea.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll be right back.
Taking a quick pause here for technical difficulties.
All right, let me try this. Is that any better?
It is, I think. Yeah. Do you want to go back one slide and just cover that one?
Yeah, sure. I know there was an ambulance that drove by. So let's maybe here.
That's not any better now.
Went low again.
That's weird.
If you just scoot closer, that's when we can hear you the best, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got this. Okay, I'll forge ahead and try my best here. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna back up a little bit to the first step of Beep. So after registration, it's gonna pop up this first question, and you're just gonna want to select benchmark property and yes to existing portfolio user, and click continue. And then a secondary registration page will pop up, and it's just going to prompt you to enter your information exactly as it appears in your portfolio account. And you can always reference that if you can't remember any of these specifics. And you're going to click submit. At that point, Beep is going to provide a token or a unique ID. And this is what you're going to type into Portfolio Manager to begin this connection between the two. I just want to point out this little note right above the token is just prompting you to, after you enter that token into Portfolio Manager, to remember to log out of Beep and then back in. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but just want to point that out to you. So now we're going to head over to Portfolio Manager. You're going to log in as you always do. You're going to go to Account, and you're going to go to Add Contacts, which will pop up this page you see on the screen. In the name box, you're going to type in Ameren Services Benchmarking Portal and click search. That is going to pop up this box you'll see on the left side of the screen, which shows the benchmarking portal, and you're going to want to click the connect button, the blue connect button, which will then take you to this page right here that prompts you to enter that unique ID. You're just going to either go back to Beep and copy and paste that over, or type that in and agree to terms and services and click, let's see, I need to move this and click send connection request. And just a quick reminder at the bottom here is to, once you do that, log out of Beep and back in. All right, and we're gonna head, after that login and log out process, we're gonna head back to Portfolio Manager. You're gonna click on the sharing tab. You're gonna click on share or edit access to a property, which will bring you to this page to the left here. And then you're going to click on the number of properties you want to do. I clicked one property, the name of the property. So I clicked on the Coronado. And if we did everything right up to this step, we are going to see our Ameren Services Benchmarking Portal listed right here in the accounts. And you're just going to click or highlight that. And then you're going to click Personalized Sharing Exchange Data and then continue. Once you do that, you're going to notice that your building and the benchmarking portal that you just connected will show up in your building's page, which is great to see. On this blue header, you're going to want to click full access. And then under exchange data, you're going to want to click edit, which will pop up this secondary box here. At that point, you're going to want to grant full access across the board. So for property information, goals, improvement checklists, and recognition. And then on share forward, you want to click yes on that and apply selections. At that point, we're going to go back to Beep. Again, I'm going to request everyone to log out and back in to Beep anytime there's this like new step in the process. It's good to do that because it seems to trigger and accept the connection requests that are going out and back and forth. So when you log back into Beep at this step, Beep will ask you this question. How do you want to add a building? So do you want to create a new building, or do you want to add a building that's already being benchmarked with Energy Star? So we're going to want to do the second option. So we'll click that. And I should have mentioned earlier, I can go back a little bit, maybe, that there is right here, there's going to be this building ID alongside your building name. And this is different from the one that Rajiv mentioned. This is the one that Energy Star or the federal government kind of assigns your building. You're going to want to remember that or where to find it and copy and paste that into this section here so that you can finalize this connection. So then you're going to click submit there. And so now your building is added. Now within Beep, all the information that you filled out that Rajiv went through, like the floor area, name, all that specific information for the building will come across a Beep, which is great to see. But the next step to get the tool to aggregate usage data is to add locations, like I mentioned. So you can either do this by address or meter ID. In my experience, most building managers know, their addresses really well, and it's much harder to know their Ameren meter ID. So I'm going to go through that process here. A quick tip is just to keep your search really simple. I always just do the street number and the street name, and that will kind of pull up a wide net for you, and you'll just be able to find and select the addresses that are associated with your facility. You're going to click all the ones that are associated, and it's going to pull them over to the selected location box right to the right of your search box. At this point, you're going to only need, so there's a little message at the box at the bottom here. If you select more or 4 or more locations, right, like I mentioned before, you're only going to need one account number to group them together and aggregate all that usage data. So for this example, if I knew the account number for apartment A, I would just type that in there and click submit, and we'd be ready to download or send across usage data to Energy Star. So like I said, locations are added. What's the next step? You're going to see this box up here pop up on your Beep screen. You can either, like I said, export or view within Beep. We want to export, so you're going to click export to Energy Star, and that's going to pop this box up where you can choose 2 months or 24 months, which is the most and the least amount of data that you can transfer over. There's another secondary question here is if you'd like to set up recurring exports, which I always recommend. To click that, so basically as months pass and the usage data becomes available within Beep, it will pass that right over to Energy Star automatically, so you don't have to do this step over and over again each month with that, which I think is really great. So once you have those selected, you click submit. I'm jumping back just a little bit. Just wanted to show you, if you did want to work within Beep, what that usage data would look like. So I selected all of 2020 here and click search, and then this is what pops up. It's the month and the kWh usage for each month. And then the download button here is where you can click that and download to Excel if you need to. But let's hop over to Portfolio Manager and see what that looks like. So if you go back to ESPM and you click on the building you added and then the meter that we added through this whole connection process, this is what will pop up for you from Beep. So again, it's the start of the month, the end of the month, and the kWh usage for each month. Unfortunately, Beep does not pull across total cost for security reasons or any of these other things, but you can fill those in from your bill or from knowledge if you do know it. But yep, so Beep, really focuses on just the kWh usage, and so exactly what's required, but nothing more. And then real quick, if you do need any help, or if you couldn't hear me this whole time, there is a FAQ section on the homepage. There's also a support button, which you can either fill out a little dialog box, which will send me an email, or you can refer to our user guide. And that really covers it. I will give it back to you, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I want to thank Rajiv and Mike for co-presenting with me today. And I will just emphasize this BEEP website, beep.ameren.com, and also the city's benchmarking website, stlbenchmarking.com, should you need more information on either the process of benchmarking and how to report your data, and also how to use BEEP. So thanks again for